Okay, so to start, let's go back to what we discussed last time at the end about Polemachus and his understanding of justice and how Socrates argues that justice would not involve harming anybody. Last time we focused on some of the details of the way that Socrates makes this argument in the text. This time let's try to be a little bit more kind of broad, or just talk about the basic ideas without focusing so much on horses and dogs and so on. And Socrates is basically saying if justice is virtue, understood not in the sense of self-denial or self-renunciation or something, but understood in the sense of human excellence or human flourishing, something that's genuinely good for people, and this is a basic part of what most people think that justice or morality is, that it's not simple self-renunciation, not simple self-punishment, that there is something positively good, that the just person is in some sense better, not just morally better, but is fulfilled in some way as a human being than the unjust person. Socrates says that's true if justice is virtue, understood in the sense of excellence or flourishing, and injustice is vice, understood in the sense of a sort of spiritual or psychological sickness, then why would anybody ever choose injustice, which is bad, over justice, which is good? Of course, the argument would be, well, they never would. Someone who does what is bad, who chooses what is bad, namely injustice, the bad men, the enemies that Polemachus is talking about, if they're choosing what's bad, what injustice, then they're actually choosing to harm themselves already. So how does it make sense to want to further harm them through punishment by harming them again and saying, well, you've done something that's bad and thereby harmed yourself, and now we're going to harm you further through punishing you? Socrates is saying, how does that make sense? They're already harming themselves. What should happen is, as he puts it to Thrasymachus here, when Thrasymachus gets angry at him and Polemachus, you shouldn't be angry at us, you should pity us. If we don't know what we're doing, if we're doing something worse rather than something better, we deserve to be pitied and then educated, we don't deserve to be gotten angry at and punished or harmed in some way. So again, if justice is good, injustice is bad, and someone is choosing injustice, they're already choosing to harm themselves, so harming them further through punishment doesn't really make sense. And then, again, why would they willingly choose what is worse? It must only be because they're ignorant, because they're confused, because they're mistaken about what's really good. So the famous phrase or idea associated with Socrates, that knowledge is virtue, that if you know what is good and justice is good, you will always choose what is good, namely justice. And if you know what is bad, injustice, then you will never choose what is actually bad for you. You will never actually choose to harm yourself. Again, if people are choosing that, it must be because they're ignorant and therefore they don't deserve to be harmed. They deserve to be educated. You can think of the analogy with medicine, the body, physical health that Socrates comes back to throughout Book 1. If somebody thinks that what they're doing is making them healthy, but it's really making them sick, it doesn't really make sense to get angry and to harm them for doing that. They're already harming themselves. And again, why would they harm themselves unless they're making a mistake? What you should do is show them what's good for them. Show them what's actually healthy. Don't get angry and punish them. Educate them. Show them how this other way is better. Now, of course, you could come back and say, well, look, all of this sounds very good in theory. Yes, justice is good, injustice is bad. Therefore, people would always choose justice if they know that it's good. Just like physical health is good, physical sickness is bad. People will always choose to be healthy if they know what that will involve. But of course, you might say in practice, obviously, it's not like that. In practice, we all, make decisions that are bad for us, certainly in terms of physical health. We all, don't exercise or eat things we shouldn't, or smoke or drink, or all of the above. And in the same way, you might say, and even in terms of morality, we all do things that we know are wrong. We all have habits we know aren't really good for us, but we still indulge them. And so, you might say, look, in theory this sounds good, but in practice things are much more complicated than that. And justice, injustice, it's not quite as easy to say, well, one is good and one is bad. In fact, one is good but difficult, one is bad but often pleasant or easier. Just like, again, you could say, being healthy versus being sick. Socrates' response might be, well, when I say virtue is knowledge, I mean a really, really deep kind of knowledge. Not just that you've heard that something is bad for you, or even that you know on some level that it is. If you smoke and you know smoking causes cancer, yes, you know that you're doing something bad, but Socrates might argue, but you don't, if you're still choosing the pleasure of smoking over the good of health, unless of course you just don't care and you don't care about getting cancer and dying, what you're really doing, he might say, is deluding yourself in some way. Or You just haven't really accepted it as knowledge. You haven't really accepted it as genuine knowledge, as genuine truth that smoking is bad for you. And he might say, and it's the same with injustice. If you are, stealing from somebody, and you continue doing it, it's because you don't really accept that it's bad for you. You may have heard stealing is wrong, but clearly you don't really think that it's bad if you continue to do it, and therefore what the response, the way to deal with this ideally would be to educate you and rehabilitate you, not to harm you or punish you. Now again, it may be that in practice some people can't be educated or can't be rehabilitated. So the practical implications are somewhat unclear, like some of the other very radical ideas that he has. But again, so this is what is sort of brought out here. Why does punishment as harm not make sense? Because if we're doing that, then we're acting as if justice itself isn't good, as if injustice is what's good. And again, Socrates here kind of identifying a problem or a kind of contradiction at the heart of a lot of conventional attitudes towards justice or towards morality. The idea that on the one hand we say justice is good, injustice is bad, and yet oftentimes when people commit injustice, we react with anger as if they've gotten away with something. People do a Ponzi scheme or something, and people get angry as if they've done something, as if they've gotten away with something. Why shouldn't we see it more as if they've really done something that's bad? Why shouldn't we pity them? And again, if we can educate them, but in any case, react towards them with pity. Here's someone who's so obsessed with money that they'll lie, they'll compromise themselves, they'll give up everything that's really important about being a human being just for the sake of getting money. Surely this person should be pitied. We shouldn't be angry at them and talking about how we should, do these terrible things to them because they stole our money. We should regard them more, again, with pity and with a desire to, if possible, try to teach them, try to improve them. So all of this sort of comes out of Socrates' discussion with Polemachus. Socrates or Plato doesn't really develop it here, but it is, again, also important for his encounter now with Thrasymachus, who in many ways, as we'll see, is much more conventional than Socrates. And what does that mean, conventional? Well, I mean, sort of one of the really fundamental differences, or one of the fundamental ideas in Greek philosophy, was the distinction between nature and convention. You see this it carries all the way through most of Western philosophy. You can see it in the Declaration of Independence, for instance, the idea that there's a certain things are true by nature, that by nature all people are equal, and therefore society should be based on this fact of natural equality, not on conventional hierarchies that have been created to benefit some and are therefore unjust. So this idea, nature versus convention, this was very fundamental to ancient Greek philosophy. The idea was nature is what is everywhere the same. Nature is what is, in a sense, then true. Convention is what changes from place to place, and therefore is worth less and is, not really true. I mean, if the definition of justice changes from one place to the next, then whatever this is that keeps changing must not be true, and it must not be as valuable as things that are true everywhere. So if certain facts about the human body are true everywhere, so that you can study medicine everywhere in the world, the fact that laws change, the fact that when you study law in the United States or in China or in France, you're studying a different set of laws, that means that nature and the truths that exist about nature are, again, more true and more important for trying to guide our lives than these conventional things that change from place to place. And some of these conventional things, again, the idea is that, well, they're not true, they're false, and the idea isn't just that there's a distinction here, that there's a difference, but that nature is, again, better, but also that convention does real harm or real violence to nature. So a good example of what the ancient Greek philosophers meant by the difference between nature and convention, some of you may know, in traditional Chinese society, small feet on women were considered to be very beautiful. So rather than just admiring small feet on women when they happen to see them grow naturally, when they were little girls, they would break their feet and then bind them so that they couldn't grow to their natural size. And this is an example of what the Greeks meant by convention. Somebody gets some bizarre idea that somehow small feet are beautiful, not the actual natural size to which feet grow, but they should be small. Why exactly, it's not entirely clear, but people get this conventional idea that this is what's beautiful, this is what's attractive. And then they basically, mutilate nature in order to produce what is conventionally considered to be good or beautiful. So naturally feet grow to the size that they grow to, but to accord with convention, let's break, feed, and bind them, so that way they will accord to what is conventionally considered beautiful rather than what is naturally good and naturally good for the individual. Obviously, this would be very painful. So that's kind of a good illustration of what the Greeks meant by nature versus convention. Okay, and we see here as Thrasymachus enters the conversation that in many ways he's much more conventional than Socrates. He comes in and he's very angry right away. Socrates kind of jokes around. He sort of says, Thrasymachus is getting frustrated. Socrates says we could all see that, but he wanted to jump in a few other times, but people kept stopping him because they wanted to hear the end of the conversation between Polemachus and I. They wanted to hear how we were going to finish it, what we were going to finally say about justice. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. Socrates says he was like a wild animal. He makes a joke that if Thrasymachus had seen him first, Socrates would have been struck speechless. The note in your translation explains that there was an ancient Greek belief that if a wolf saw a human being before the human being saw the wolf, the human being would be struck speechless. So Socrates kind of jokingly compares him to a wild wolf, says he's like a wild animal. He comes in, and Thrasymachus is very angry, and as we were just kind of talking about with the notion of justice, and especially the notion of a kind of angry, punitive sense of justice, it's very conventional. It doesn't necessarily make sense. So already there's a sign, Thrasymachus much more angry and moralistic than Socrates. Socrates and him kind of spar, and Socrates kind of fights back and so on, and so he's not just totally pacifist or anything, but he doesn't share this kind of angry moralistic attitude of Thrasymachus. Socrates seems much more sort of calm and of course very playful in some cases. Thrasymachus, again, angry, feels as if, look, there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, and Socrates, you're doing it in the way that's wrong, you're doing something dishonest. So he's angry, he thinks that Socrates should be punished. And he's very, in particular, what he thinks that Socrates is doing, in the way that he's being dishonest, Thrasymachus thinks, is that Socrates has all kinds of ideas about justice in this case, but he refuses to state them because he knows it's much harder to actually present your own ideas and then argue and defend them. He knows that it's much easier to let somebody else speak and then find problems with whatever they're saying, pick their answer apart, pick their arguments apart, and therefore look very smart because it looks like, well, you've defeated the person who you were questioning. And Thrasymachus says, look, it's obvious that's what you're doing. Some of you may be somewhat sympathetic to this criticism or complaint, but Thrasymachus says, look, this is what you're doing, and again, you may be sympathetic, but you see here that sort of something about what Thrasymachus thinks about the purpose of conversations like this. He says, look, he sees it basically a competition for honor, a competition for reputation. That the person who speaks the best, the person who has the best ideas and can defend them the best and kind of vanquish everybody else, that person gets the honor. They're sort of the winner in some way. Socrates basically says, on the contrary, he says, no, look, Polemachus and I, it's like a friendly pursuit for knowledge. It's like we're searching for gold. As it happens, we're searching for the truth about justice, which he says is much more valuable than gold. But he says, it's like a friendly, cooperative venture or activity where we're trying to discover something important. But it's basically a partnership. It's not a competition, and what we're after isn't reputation or honor or anything like that. What we're after is the truth. And Thrasymachus doesn't see it that way. He says, look, the real purpose for all of this is honor. And so again, you see he's much more conventional than Socrates. He's clearly smart. He's a very good speaker. He's a very successful sophist. We talked about this in a previous lecture. Someone who travels around Greece and teaches people the art of rhetoric, the art of speaking well in public. We'll see he also probably teaches them certain substantive things about justice. Namely, he basically says it doesn't exist. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the basic idea here is Polemachus, he's a sophist, he's clever, he's smart, he's very accomplished, but he's still very much trapped in this concern with honor, which is to say the concern with other people's opinions, something that Socrates is relatively free from. And we see it very much in Thrasymachus how concerned he is with money. It comes up in a kind of comical way in a few places where he's praising injustice and talking about how the unjust man gets more money and gets the better in contracts and so on. But it also comes out where he wants Socrates to pay a fine in money. So he wants to punish Socrates because he has this kind of angry moralistic streak. And what would punishment be? I mean, Socrates says, again, going back to these ideas we were just discussing, Socrates says, well, if we don't know what's going on and you do, the fitting punishment would be for you to teach us. Tell us what justice is. But how else would you punish us? I mean, if we don't know, why would we be punished for not knowing something? And Thrasymachus says, no, you have to pay a fine. You should again, you need to actually be harmed in some way. You need to, and in particular, you need to acknowledge my superiority by giving me a fine, by giving me money. And it's not that we see that Thrasymachus is necessarily a big spender or that he loves luxury or anything like that. Again, money is sort of synonymous, or is at least a good way to get honor and respect from other people. What kind of people? Well, not necessarily people who respect intelligence or knowledge, not necessarily people who can understand those things. Money impresses all kinds of people, including, maybe especially people who aren't very intelligent. So again, Thrasymachus is very much concerned with reputation, concerned with honor among people that he himself may not respect all that much. He's a knower. We'll see as the conversation goes on, it becomes more and more clear that what he really respects, what he really takes seriously about himself and about other people is knowledge and intelligence. And yet he's, unlike Socrates, he can't quite break free and live in poverty and not worry about having a good reputation and having the money to kind of impress other people. He's very much concerned with other people's opinion and with honor. And again, it seems to go his concern with money, again, something purely conventional. That seems to be another sign of how he's concerned with other people's opinion. And again, his concern with money is a good example of that. Money, of course, by definition is conventional. We take a piece of metal or a piece of paper and we sort of assign it a certain value, but it only works as long as everybody plays along with this fiction. And there are good reasons to do it. Money is obviously useful for society and everything, but it is, again, by definition, conventional. It has only conventional value. A $100 bill, if civilization collapses, a $100 bill will be worth almost nothing. It has no natural value. It's a purely conventional value. Again, that doesn't mean that it's wholly bad or that we should get rid of it or anything like that. But again, it's a further sign of Thrasymachus being very conventional. And we'll see, there are other signs as well, other contrasts with Glaucon, for instance, who makes somewhat similar arguments to Thrasymachus, but tries to found them on nature rather than convention. So Thrasymachus comes out, he's angry, he sees, in contrast to Socrates, he sees the purpose of discussion as being a competition for honor. He swears by Heracles, he calls Socrates a human being. As the note points out, there's a difference between the Greek word for human being and the Greek word for man. So Thrasymachus, in some ways, swearing by Heracles, sort of presenting himself as very manly, calling Socrates a mere human being, not a man. Again, masculinity, very conventional. Some of you may know in some cultures it's considered manly, even kind of macho, to weep, to cry in public, to show a lot of emotion is considered very, very manly. Of course, in most Northern European cultures, it's the opposite. Being very stoic and not showing any emotion at all is considered much more masculine. So again, it's purely conventional. It's not because one society is closer to the truth about masculinity or something. Masculinity, to a large, like femininity, to a large extent, these things are simply social constructs. They're purely conventional. And again, Thrasymachus is much more concerned with them than Socrates, and again, much more concerned with a kind of conventional notion of punishing, of harming Socrates, where Socrates says, look, if we don't know what justice is, we shouldn't be punished, we should be educated. That's all that makes sense, right? That's the only thing that really makes sense for people who don't know, is to be punished by being educated. But Thrasymachus says, no, in addition to being to learning and so on, pay a fine. And as we've talked about, again, that's a sign of his concern with other people's opinion, and also therefore a concern with the conventional value of money and the conventional value of opinion or honor from other people. Again, especially the ignorant, the many people who are impressed by something like money but can't really understand and are not necessarily impressed by actual intelligence or knowledge.